Howard Pappy Mason was a man of honor and a gangster. In one of the most violent eras in New York, Pappy Mason rose above the rest to seal his reputation as one of the most feared soldiers in New York. Pappy was of the most feared, a legend of his time. In the 80s, crack, violent, street kings, and four-corner hustlers were born. It's said he was born in Alabama and moved to Brooklyn at a young age. At this time, Brooklyn was very dangerous and known for producing the thoroughest, most violent killers. Brooklyn taught him honor and how to be a man. He joined the gang early, the Jolly Stompers, and later became a stick-up kid. Back then, he wasn't known as a hustler. He was known for his quick temper, zero tolerance, and hatred for law officials. His violent ways and fights with the police landed him in juvenile detention facilities, sentenced to 5 years for attempted murder as a teenager. During one of his many stays in juvenile prison, he met another young kid who was good with his fists and hailed from the Seven Crowns gang, Lorenzo Fat Cat Nichols. The two bonded immediately. They both had the "I am my brother's keeper" mentality. Pappy stayed in the hole for fighting with prison staff. Fat Cat once said, "Pappy's the only person I know back then who had 7 years and did every day of it. He left not on a day." And when Pappy left in 1983, he had spent a quarter of his 23 years in prison. In every hood, people make a name for themselves. Pappy was no different. By the time he hit the projects in '83, Fat Cat was well established as a drug dealer on 150th Street in Queens. Pappy went to the block looking for Cat, and Cat hired him on the spot for $1,000 a week as his security. Fat Cat wanted Pap on his team because he knew he was loyal and fearless. Pappy did his job with a vengeance. He pistol whipped a prostitute who stole from Cat, shot a rival drug dealer trying to overtake Cat's territory, and murdered a custo outside of a church because the customer complained about Fat Cat's product. Pappy's viciousness and image enhanced his already fearsome reputation. His loyalty was rewarded by Fat Cat. He handed Pappy a lucrative drug operation in the projects to get money. Pappy took the spot and did numbers. Soon, Pappy formed his own organization, the B-Boys. They all grew dreads and sold cocaine and heroin. Along with the dreadlocks, Pappy's crew emulated him, from his violent ways to his speech patterns. He had a strong influence in Queens. Also, the B-Boys adopted Rastafarian culture as their own. They got a thing where they call one love, and when Pappy say you do, you do. One love meant do or die. They was all family. Pappy was on 150th Street, but his crew held down the 40 projects. The Bebo gang had leather jackets with Bebo on it. And though Pappy united them, there was no boss. Every man governed himself accordingly. Bebo is a way of life to Rasta men and Ja, for real. But even with his own crew in spot, Pappy was still in charge of Cat's security. The moment crack struck New York, it changed Queens drastically. Violence erupted, and Pappy was at the center of it all. When Fat Cat was arrested in '85, Pappy crept on the arresting officer as he escorted Fat Cat to a police car. Pappy slipped behind the cop and was prepared to shoot the cop to free Cat so he could escape, but Cat shook his head no. So Pappy crept back into the cut, gun still in hand. Pap often visited Cat in jail and also threatened Fat Cat's girl after his arrest. "I don't know what you know, Pap told her. But Cat says, you better forget it. And when Cat's parole officer was murdered for violating Cat's state parole, Pappy was the main suspect. On February 28, 1985, detectives arrested Pappy for murder. An informant told detectives he lured the PO to the ambush spot where Pappy gunned him down. When detectives arrested Pappy, he had a loaded .22 in his boot, adding to his charges. When asked to give a statement against Fat Cat for the murder of the PO, he refused to cooperate with detectives. Because he refused to snitch, Pappy joined his boss in the Queens Detention Center. But during Pappy's incarceration, his legend only grew. He had a big presence in Queens. It's said that while he was incarcerated, Pappy gave an affiliate a gold ring worth $40,000 off his finger in a visit at Rikers to take care of his business. Pappy would contact his crew in the streets from Rikers to delegate orders. Prior to Pappy's murder trial in '86, not one person came to testify against Pappy Mason. Pappy had respect on the street, and his cold-blooded tactics instilled fear in people's hearts. His influence was strong. The prosecutors and judge in the case received constant death threats leading into the trial. And before the case, the prosecutor's star witness, Perry Bellamy, refused to testify. Pappy got his man. Only Bellamy's tape confession was played for the jury. But without a live witness willing to testify, the jury hung. As Pappy made bail in February 1988, after the hung jury, he formed an imaginary gun with his thumb and index finger, turned to the prosecutor, and pulled the trigger. Pappy Mason was free again, but this time he was on the streets for only 10 days. But during those 10 days, he set in motion what would shock the nation. Pappy was on bail and drinking beer on a South Jamaica street corner when a cop confronted him. "Do me a favor," a cop said to Pappy. "Don't drink that beer in front of me." Pappy was stunned. No cop ever told him what to do. "Do you know who I am?" he demanded of the cop. "Yeah, the guy who's going to put his beer in a paper bag," the cop replied. "Fuck you," Pappy screamed, and a shoving match ensued. After a couple of seconds, Pappy walked off, his beer on the ground, spilling on the pavement. Pappy was in a rage. "That cop has to die," Pap said. "He dissed me." Death threats against the cop followed, and he was pulled from the streets for his protection. Pappy was arrested regarding the gun case when he got arrested with the .22. He was remanded a week later, and Pappy was back at Rikers. He had only lasted 10 days on the street since the Rooney murder. He was out before they remanded him. He was organizing at that time. It was already planned. Pappy Mason was about to set in motion a jarring set of events that would have repercussions for decades to come. "We lose one, they lose one," Pappy allegedly told Marshall. Pappy wanted the Bebos to send the police a message. He wanted to send a message out. The message was that even though he was behind bars, he still gave orders. The message was devastating. Pappy wanted a cop hit. He was eventually convicted on a gun charge, but that was the least of his worries. When Pap went to jail after Cat, most of Cat's strength in the streets was gone. And Pappy knew this. He needed to do something drastic to keep his power in the hood in check. Something unheard of. His message was carefully constructed to have a maximum effect. Early in the morning of February 28, 1988, NYPD officer Edward Byrne A 22-year-old rookie was shot 5 times in the head while sitting in his patrol car in Queens, 103rd Precinct, protecting a witness whose house had been firebombed after he testified against some local drug dealers. The rookie's murder was front-page news all over the nation and kicked the war on drugs into high gear, leading to the creation of New York's Tactical Narcotics Task Force, TNT. Informants said some Jamaicans from Brooklyn killed the cop. Pappy went to prison the day before the officer was killed. 4 suspects, all Bebos, were immediately arrested. Todd Scott, Scott Cobb, David McCleary, and Philip Copeland. 3 of the 4 suspects made statements implicating themselves. The only one who didn't talk was Philip Copeland. The police played it up to implicate the drug lord Fat Cat in the media. This was an order, not for the murder of a particular officer, but any officer for the purpose of delivering a message of death to anyone who opposed Fat Cat. Lieutenant Phillip of the Queens Homicide Squad stated. But behind the scenes, a different tale was emerging. Cat was mad about what that stupid motherfucker Pappy did. Viola Nichols, Cat's sister, said. What the Bebos did was fucked up, Cat raged. Now nobody will make no money. And in a call to Viola, Pappy explained his reasons. The man dissed me. It was because the police officer ordered Pappy to put out a can of beer in a brown paper bag. But as Cat found out Pappy had the wrong cop killed, the execution-style murder was said to have been ordered by Pappy from prison for revenge against the police. And to make matters worse, on August 12, 1988, the feds indicted Fat Cat and his whole crew on racketeering charges. The New York Daily News headline read, Fat Cat's empire crumbles. Feds bust drug clan. 20 million in dope seized. 30 suspects nabbed in massive raid. The suspects included Pap and Cat's mother. While all this was going down, Pappy was sentenced for the gun, receiving a 3.5 to 7 year sentence. At sentencing, he told the judge, "You gotta do what you gotta do. I look crazy, so people are going to judge me on that." This is 2 cops I supposedly allegedly killed. Cops come to me at the precinct and say I'm the leader of a drug ring. I've never been arrested for drugs in my life. I don't know what they're talking about. The federal racketeering and conspiracy case included charges that Pappy and Fat Cat orchestrated and gave the order to kill the cop. The 4 suspects in the state case, the trigger man and 3 cohorts, had already been convicted and sentenced to 25 to life. Now the feds were going after the ringleaders. Todd Scott provided a statement saying Pappy ordered the hit, but he wasn't the only one who betrayed his man. It's alleged that on September 29th, 1989, in a secret court session, Fat Cat agreed to testify against Pappy Mason. The feds offered me and Pap 40 years under the old law to cop out to 848 for our mother's freedom, Cat explained. Pap said he wasn't going to plead guilty. I took the plea. There was a lot of outrage in the streets at the time concerning Fat Cat's alleged snitching. And there was an outrage at the prosecutor's office too, where one prosecutor said using Fat Cat to get Pappy is like using syphilis to get gonorrhea. But to this day, Pappy maintains that Cat never testified against him. His name is not in any of my paperwork. Pappy Mason went to trial alone in a federal racketeering case. He said his mother facing the indictment knows about white people. She said God will make a way. Pappy's lawyer tried to entertain an insanity defense in November 1989, but it didn't work. Pappy was violent in court, causing the judge to evict him from trial, forcing Pappy to follow the proceedings on a specially installed speaker system in his cell. "They did me wrong," Pappy said. "Ja is good. It was no trial. It was a KKK meeting. That was not an indictment." Pappy defied the police in the street and jail. Some guys don't bend. They don't move, they fight. It's in the nature of a soldier like Pappy Mason. He could get violent in a minute. He was only 5'8", but was like a pit bull with heart and viciousness. Pappy was one of the most notorious killers to ever walk the streets of New York. Pappy is currently serving out his sentence in the ADX, Florence, in Colorado.